Hello, and welcome to the podcast that tries to answer one simple question. What is this thing called film noir? I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street. Launched by Southwest Silence in 2021, Bristol-based Film Noir UK is the first British organisation dedicated to showcasing this most influential of movie styles and movements on the big screen. Now they've launched their own Film Noir Festival, which is billed as the Classic Noir and Crime Film Festival. Film Noir Fest takes place at the Plaza Cinema in Weston-super-Mare from the 1st to the 3rd of November 2024, and I'm really looking forward to being there. Ahead of the festival, I sat down with James Harrison, the festival's director and Film Noir UK co-founder. He is a film graduate from the University of the West of England and has worked at BBC Bristol on numerous film and archive-related documentary productions. James, welcome to the podcast. It's really great to have you.
Thanks, Sergio. It's absolutely brilliant to be here, so I'm really thrilled that we're having this chat.
Now, before we get really stuck in and talk about Film Noir Fest 2024 and Film Noir UK, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about, my first icebreaker question to you is, what is your definition of film noir?
Okay, I'm a bit of an oddball when it comes to film noir because, one, I don't find it as a genre. Everyone else, a good chunk of people call it a genre, which I don't, because the one thing I would say about film noir is that it's a feeling, it's an element, it's something which you see, which kind of seeps into any other genre. So it's almost, if you want to go down that route, let's go with a subgenre, because it's something which I feel seeps into other genres. So musicals, for instance, like we look at Otto Preminger's Carmen, that's a film noir musical. And then you've also got a film noir western, so you've got the Oxbow Instant or Furies, and that's film noir into the western. So there's so, and it so happens, it seeps into every crime film ever made nearly. So it kind of seeps in that way, and I feel it is a feeling, it's a look, it's a style which kind of just comes out of anywhere, beginning to seep into the Marvel universe with a little bit of the Spider-Verse, and also the possibility of the Spider-Man noir series.
Yes, so looking forward to that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's still happening. I heard rumors that it's not happening now, or something's happened with it. Anyway, but for my feeling is it's just that feeling and sense that just seeps into everything which is going on. And specifically at the moment, there is this essence that film noir or neo noir is coming back in a real way due to the likes of television. And I don't know if you've seen the new Batman series, which is on Amazon, which is the Caped Crusader.
It's on my list. Yes, I've I've got it to watch. Yeah.
J.J. Abrams has got his hands all over it, and it's screaming out noir. I mean, the title sequence alone is just quite amazing. I've been sitting down watching it with my 10-year-old. He's loving it.
So they're kind of going back to their sort of origins in Detective Comics, really, and things like that.
Yeah, that detective aspect is back there a little bit, with obviously with a good amount of action, and it is testing the line of between should this be suitable for kids or not. I mean, it's 12 plus on Amazon, and Jack's fine with it, but there's points where it's just like, we're getting to the point where you should be watching this. But anyway,
I mean, how old is your boy?
He's 10.
He's 10, and so this is kind of going to be more or less his first real experience of noir.
Not really, because of course, as always, I'm always watching stuff in the background, and I've got, he knows who Humphrey Bogart is and who James Cagney is.
Right. This was my cunning way of leading me into me asking you, what was your first ever film noir, your first primal experience?
So I have been thinking about this, and recently, because by chance there was another podcast and they covered this film, and I realised basically after I'd listened to these guys talking about this particular film, and I realised it was the 1988 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, fantastic movie! Yeah.
It might surprise a couple of people because it's not obviously classic noir, but I got a copy of it on VHS, I think roughly. I'll have to, we'd have to double check when it was released in the UK on VHS, but it must have been something like 1992 or even earlier than that,
Earlier, I
maybe
think.
1990 or 90. Yeah, probably. But I've still got the VHS at home. I mean, that's how crazy I was about this film, and I literally constantly watched it just because, well, mainly because of the action films, the sequence with the cab and the taxi and everything like that. But it kind of, I think that's where it's come from. The weasels wearing the hats, the wonderful Bob Hoskins, who, I think we still miss. I definitely miss Bob Hoskins. I wish he carried on really,
Yeah.
because you look at the Long Good Friday as well, and you just think, God, what a powerhouse he was. And I think a lot of people kind of forget that now about how good Bob Hoskins was. And you watch that film and he's just amazing in it. The voice of Jessica Rabbit, who's Kathleen Turner, is just like immense as well. And it just, there's not a bad bit in it. It's just so great all the way. And just think if Disney made something like this now, which they clearly wouldn't, because they'd have to have there'll have to be a couple of lightsabers in there, or another superhero in there. But it's,
well, also I think
it's
even Spielberg would have trouble getting Warner Brothers and Disney to talk to each other so that they could use characters from both libraries.
No, that's true. No, that's totally true. But my understanding, from what I remember about reading about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, is that Disney and Warner's basically agreed, and Warner's basically had this thing, they had it written into the contract where you couldn't have more Mickey Mouse than Bugs Bunny. So hence the reason the sequence where Bob Hoskins is falling from the sky, and you've got Mickey and Bugs all at the same time, and then you've got Daffy Duck and Donald Duck playing the piano, and they all have to have the same airtime. So, and right at the end, of course, Mickey is there with Bugs once again. So it's just like, that's how they agreed it. It's just like the pair of them had to have the same amount of airtime. If not, it wouldn't work.
It's like Star Billing in the Towering Inferno or something on the poster.
Yeah. Or, like in Goldeneye, when the Aston Martin has to lose against the Ferrari. So it's ridiculous, but this is how that business works in so many ways. But no, I still think that's the film which influenced me the most to loving film noir.
Well, to give you some idea how old I am, I bought that on Laserdisc.
Oh my God, really?
And I still have it because, as far as I am aware, there was that little controversy about some slightly naughty in-jokes that had been put.
The frame.
Yes, exactly. Well, the version of the Laserdisc that I had, the great thing about Laserdisc was that if you had a CAV format Laserdisc, which meant it only ran for 30 minutes, but it was literally every single frame, which DVD never did. DVD had to compress things and gave you, it looks like you're looking at it a frame at a time, but it's not an actual 100% real frame. Whereas on CAV Laserdisc, you had on the remote control, you had a button and you could go one frame, which was brilliant for a time, because for academic work, actually, that was extraordinary. It really meant you could genuinely be completely scene specific and frame specific, so that people like Bordwell and Thompson, for them it was a kind of revolutionary thing. It didn't last nearly as long as it could have done, and it's a 12-inch disc. I mean, you had to flip it over. You couldn't last more than an hour, of course, at best, and the CAV one's only 30 minutes. I mean, I have the original Star Wars trilogy on CAV Laserdisc, which means it's before all the additions.
Yeah, the 97.
Yeah.
Oh, even.
Yeah, so it's before all of that, although unfortunately it is the 78 re-release version. So it does say A New Hope, and it's, chapter 4.
Right,
and
okay.
But otherwise, it's exactly as it was in the cinemas, and it's as close as you're ever going to get. So I'm hanging on to that. But at the time, you would have to spend well over £100 to buy that. I mean, it's just madness. It was such a niche product. But that's a whole different conversation, and let's face it, probably a whole different podcast. So we're here to talk about Film Noir Fest 2024, which is organised by Film Noir UK. Can you tell us a little bit about how that started?
Yeah, so Film Noir UK basically came out of Southwest Silence, and a bit of a backstory. Southwest Silence is an organisation I run with two other partners, Rosie Taylor and Peter Walsh, and it's an organisation which bases itself around screening silent films with live music, with brand new restorations from around the world, all up on the big screen for new audiences. And we've been going for over 8 years now, and been doing stuff on and off. Used to do monthly screenings with live music for quite some time in the Bristol area, by the way, and then hence the Southwest thing. And we used to do a couple of other things outside the Bristol area as well. And then lockdown happened, and I kind of started going through all my old DVD collections and started thinking, well, do I really need all this now? Because we've kind of downsized a little bit. And I started going through while I was working at the same time. I kind of just stuck, as you do, when we were all stuck at home, I would just stick a film on in the background. And it was mainly some of the old Warner Brothers signature box sets, which was stuff like Joan Crawford box set and the Long Bacall and Bacall and Bogart and yeah, exactly, all the classics. And I always loved Warner Brothers. It's my favorite studio because it's just it was kind of just the realism in it when it comes to stuff like all the Cagney films and the Bogart films. And I was kind of sitting there watching it while doing work at the same time. And I was thinking, I'd love to screen some of this again. Nearly all of it I'd never seen on the big screen. And I was umming and ahhing, and then further down the road I was just thinking, if I'm really going to kick myself if I'm never going to redo this. And I'd been doing talks with Peter and some of the other guys about doing film societies in universities and stuff. And the question which always came up was, where next? Where you guys are doing silent film, and there's a Bristol Bad Film Club at the time, and there's a number of other organisations which specialises in certain areas of film. And they said, what would you suggest next? And I always said film noir. There's so much you can do with it, because not only are you looking at the classics, you're looking at the development of neo noir, and then Blade Runner and everything like that. And I basically said, this is what everyone should be looking at next. And this was like a couple of, this was going back to 2017 and 2019 when I was doing these talks with Peter, and no one seemed to pick it up. And then it just came back into my mind again during the first lockdown. It's like, why shouldn't I do this? I had a chat with Peter about it and the rest of the team at Southwest Science, and I said, look, I'm probably going to do this. I'm going to do probably on my own if you guys aren't up for it, but I would love to just carry on under the Southwest Science banner, because the great thing is that film noir, we could look at pre-film noir, which we'll come to in a minute when it comes to Film Noir Fest, is that there are elements of film noir in silent film anyway. You've got Fritz Lang and the cinematographers carried on into film noir. So there's the elements there. Some of the stars, like Mary Astor from The Maltese Falcon, was a key silent film star at the time. Peter Lorre, in so many ways. I know his first key film is M, which is a little bit later than the silent era. But all those elements kind of worked. And in the end, I was just thinking, no, I'm just going to do this. So I had a chat with the rest of the guys, had a word with Watershed, who is the wonderful cinema which we have in Bristol. And I said, look, I wouldn't mind trying to do some sort of small little launch and see what it feels like. And we double billed. We did The Maltese Falcon and Stranger on the Third Floor, which both films came out at the same time. And both films star Elijah Cook Jr.,
the eternal fall guy,
and Peter Lorre. yeah, and Peter Lorre. Yeah, no, I love Elijah Cook Jr. God, why there isn't I don't know of any book out there of his life and work. That there should be one, because if anything, definitely. Elijah Cook Jr. needs to be. He is the fall guy for every film noir out there. And he's one of the guys that's just like, oh, thank God, Elijah Cook Jr. is in it. This is going to be great fun. And that's where, in a nutshell, that's where film noir came from. It was just me literally sitting at home watching DVDs, thinking I want to screen some of this and see it on the big screen again, like we were doing with silent film anyway. And it's just kind of built from there, really. We had at Watershed we had a once a month screenings for a couple of years, which did very well. Kind of got the odd 35mm print in from the BFI. Stranger on the Third Floor was from 35, and we've got friends from Southwest Science who are involved, like Matthew Sweet and Pamela Hutchinson, and from there we've kind of built up. We've got Stephen Frears is one of our patrons now, and right. Katrina Boorman, who is John Boorman's daughter, is one of our patrons as well. So it's one of those, and Eden Enfield, who's Cy Enfield, who did Try and Get Me, and then of course in later life film Zulu. Yes. So we're kind of building up, really, and it came to the point where it was just like, it feels like a good point to try out a mini film festival, as it were, because it just, and especially with the Plaza Cinema, which is a wonderful little cinema in Weston-super-Mare, which has been getting a bit of press in the last couple of years because it was about to be closed, and then thankfully the great Merlin Cinemas stepped in, and we kind of been speaking to Merlin on and off about doing something, whether it was silent film or noir, and then everything slid into place.
Fantastic. Got a wonderful program. So first just to, unless anybody's not noticed, so that you changed the dates. Originally it was going to be the middle of November,
yeah.
and you brought it back a fortnight. So it's from the 1st to the 3rd of November. Is that right?
Yeah, so the 1st and the 3rd, and apologies, we were very lucky because basically we only had a handful of people who booked early bird passes, and thankfully nearly everyone was able to change them, bar one person, which I spoke to them and apologised immensely. But the reason for the change was a certain Ridley Scott film called Gladiator 2.
Oh, that.
Decided to bring it forward in the UK by 1 week. We knew Gladiator 2 was coming. I was speaking to Merlin, and they said, look, these are the dates. And I said, well, let's stay away from Gladiator 2. And they said, yep, fine. So we said, right, that particular week, the initial date was going to be the release date. And then the trailer came out, and they announced that it was a week early for the UK. And it was like, okay.
Darn.
And it was literally the same day which we launched the festival press-wise. And it was just like, oh no. And all due respect to Merlin, they're a small independent commercial chain, as it were, for a cinema, and they're going to lose money if they. And also, Paddington 3 is out around that same time, and it was like, no, this is. It is always about. I need to think about the venue because cinema's having a hard time still at the moment. So I just basically bit the bullet, and we all agreed that we'd move it to the 1st to the 3rd of November, which kind of works because it's the beginning of Noirvember.
Noirvember, yeah. I was going to ask you if that was deliberate. Yeah,
exactly. When it comes to November, yes, it was totally deliberate because it's just it's a perfect timing, really. It wouldn't have worked in December because obviously everyone's doing Christmas. October is way too busy for what I'm doing when it comes to other things involving Southwest Silence and Pordenone Silent Film Festival in Italy. So November just seemed perfect for my end anyway. And then, of course, the Noirvember hashtag is another thing. So it just seems right, really.
Yeah, I know. I completely get it. I mean, so let's talk about Film Noir Fest 2024. The first one, hopefully the first of many, many, many more.
Yeah. Well, there's plans are afoot for 2 and 3 already, I think.
Oh, good. I'll be there. So you got 1 ticket sold.
Yeah.
So it begins on the 1st of November. You'll need more than that. So we start on the 1st of November, and you're celebrating 2 centenaries. One is Lauren Bacall at 100, and the other one is Lee Marvin. So the opening night on the 1st is going to be this double bill of almost the 2 great ends of the film noir filmography of Lee Marvin. So you've got The Big Heat and Point Blank, which are both fantastically violent and effective revenge dramas. And I think that they're a great double bill, I think. So well done on that score. I mean, they're both brilliant movies.
It was kind of, do I do it this way or not? Because the first major thing when it came to the programming, I just started looking at, right, what anniversaries have we got coming up? And then obviously there was a couple which involved, Double Indemnity and Human Desire and stuff, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then I was kind of thinking, God, there must be some stars which they got the centenaries or something's happening. And I looked into Lee Marvin was the first one, actually. I didn't realise the Lauren Bacall thing was going on until a little bit, just further down a week later, I'd realised it. But no, the Lee Marvin thing has kind of been there for ages because the great thing is with Lee Marvin, he kind of starts in that classics. Well, he's in that moment when film noir is film noir in so many ways with The Big Heat, and it's just a classic film anyway. And it's 1953, isn't it? So it is that moment where everything comes together, and you've got Glenn Ford in it. You've got Gloria Graham, who actually, do you know what? It was Gloria Graham initially, which started this whole thing off because I really wanted to do a centenary on Gloria Graham last year, and it just didn't quite work because I couldn't find the space at the venues and everything like that.
Right.
And so The Big Heat was there. And then I realised when the idea of Film Noir Fest was going to happen, I was like, right, I'll put Big Heat on. And then I realised actually it's not going to work with Gloria Graham, but the Lee Marvin thing might work, and that's where it started from there. And the thing is with Lee Marvin, sorry, I'm babbling a little bit, but the thing is with Lee Marvin is that, and the Big Heat is 1953, and it's perfect. And with the Big Heat, it's a classic noir. It's brutal in so many ways. Glenn Ford's great in it. Lee Marvin's great in it. Gloria Graham's great in it. And then I just thought with Point Blank, it was like 1967. It's a different era. It's a different type of film. It's directed by a British film director, John Boorman. So it's those kind of elements which kind of just work. And I just felt you get a classic noir for one part of the night, and you get something a little bit different later for the rest of it. And the other aspect is what I really want to do is the late night screening is always going to be classed as late neo-noir nights. So that's something which I want to kind of continue with throughout the next editions of the festival, is that we have those late screens which are neo-noir nights. So it's something a little bit different for everyone to watch instead of a classic.
No, that's great. And I agree with you completely. I mean, certainly with The Big Heat, which is in some respects not an automatically obvious noir title because it's partly about police corruption, which is actually something that under the production code wasn't going to happen too often. And also it's one of those slightly odd films in that Lee Marvin and Gloria Graham, who are in fact two supporting players with their own, shall we say, subsidiary narrative, actually dominate the film. To me, although it's supposed to be about Glenn Ford and his big revenge arc after, not to do huge spoilers, but basically he has to do a massive revenge thing. But really, what I always remember is, of course, is the interaction between Lee Marvin and Gloria Graham. The most famous sequence in the film is theirs, after all. It's the violent moment. And what's interesting, though, is that, of course, he's playing the kind of role that Marvin played at the time, which was often very volatile characters. By the time you get to the mid-60s, starting, I think, possibly with the remake of The Killers that he stars in, with Clu Gallagher and Angie Dickinson and his last ever acting role, President Ronald Reagan, he gets into a slightly different mode. And in actual fact, Point Blank, well, he kind of has a blank demeanor in most of that film. You get the flashbacks where he's a happy guy and he's got brown hair, and then you sort of get into, shall we say, the present. I'm one of those people who thinks that the narrative is not what you're seeing is not real most of the time. I take that point of view about that film, but I love it. So it's a great movie. Boorman does such a great job. I mean, it's an extraordinary film. I mean, there is a guy who's doing a film starring the Dave Clark Five, goes over to the United States and comes out with this fantastic Nouvelle Vague style neo-noir. And it's fantastic movie, brilliantly shot by Philip Lathrop, and it's got this great dissonant score by Johnny Mandel, who the year before had done Harper with Paul Newman, which is almost like, which of course co-stars Lauren Bacall, and is, for me, actually the tipping point I always think of is where the traditional noir as we understand it, which I always think actually strays into the early 60s, in the 60s, the 60s, where there's a few stragglers really from the late 50s, and they're still in black and white. But then you kind of hit 65, 66, and you've got Harper, but there's a slightly knowing attitude in the sense that by casting Bacall, you're backward looking. You're saying this recalls 20 years earlier, and all of a sudden then you've got Point Blank and In Cold Blood, and it's a different approach to taking ideas from noir and molding them into the kinds of films that were starting to come out at the end of the studio era, and more importantly at the end of the production code. So one of the things about Point Blank, of course, is that it's much more violent. By today's standards, it's not violent at all, but it has, somebody getting punched in the crotch. That you had never seen that before. There are these two important films in the late 60s to get somebody being kicked in the balls. And one is Point Blank, where he gets punched, and the other one, The Kick in the Balls, which is from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which has a completely different tone, is much more humorous, if you like. So you don't see that in a kind of serious, nasty way. And so I think it's a great juxtaposition. I think that really works
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, and I put my hands up, The Killers was the other alternative for the big hit, and not saying too much. There's plans afoot for The Killers for another time, but it
Great.
was and I bit of a long story, but basically it was just like, do you know what? I think the big heat just works perfectly with it. The other idea which I had, because I was kind of expanding on it, and then I began to realize that actually I was going way over the top when it came to scheduling films in, and there was no way in hell I was going to get all these films in. So that's why the Lee Marvin thing is kind of on its separate own, because it's the opening night on the Friday night, and then that's it. But the idea was originally I was going to include Prime Cut in there, which is
I was going to ask you
frankly
about that
shocking
one.
film.
Yes,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
terrific neo-noir from the 70s.
Yeah, and that would carry on from where we would have had all four, or maybe a possible fifth, but it was just like, I can't fit this all in, and I need to be. That's the hardest thing about doing these film festivals, because we have a Southwest Science Film Festival down in Wareham where we just take over one screen, and it is literally what do I want to say, and what and what am I saying, selecting all these, and then go from there. Really, the Lee Marvin, like I said, the Lee Marvin night is just something separate, but it kind of gives a gist about where we want the festival to go in so many ways. It's looking at classic noir, but also where noir ends up and changing, and throughout the following decades, really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we mentioned Lauren Bacall for her appearance in Harper, but it's her centenary too. So you've got the 4 films that she made with her husband by
Yeah.
the middle of the second film, I guess, Humphrey
Yeah.
Bogart. So it's To Have and Have Not, The Big Sleep, Dark Passage, and Key Largo. I would guess Dark Passage is probably the least known of all 4 of those. But it's great that you've got all 4. That's terrific.
Once again, it was one of these in situations. Well, and I have to say, usually when it comes to film festivals, there's usually a team, and I'm involved with Cinema Rediscovered, which is wonderful, and it was one of those ones, this particular strand, and I programmed all of it really, and the Mexican Noirs, which we'll have a brief chat about in a minute, has been involved with someone else as well. But it's when it comes to the selection, it's annoyingly just been me this year, but I'm hoping to bring on other people for next year. But the Lauren Bacall one was the one which I had the worst decision
Really?
about, because, well, it's To Have and Have Not is not a noir
I would agree
in
with
any
you.
way.
I would agree. I would agree. I'm not sure about Big Sleep, to be honest.
Yeah, I still need to find out who, that entire storyline. I still don't get it, but anyway.
Oh,
That-
we could have a whole podcast on that.
oh, you can have an entire
I have
podcast.
definite opinions. Yeah.
But no, To Have and Have Not isn't a noir, and I'll be saying that it's the first film of the Saturday morning, and I'll be introducing it just very briefly, and I will say I've brought you all under false pretenses, because it's basically not a noir. It's not even a crime film. I mean, I know there's this thing about, it's a remake of Casablanca, in which you can see the elements there, but it's so many ways it's just a romantic war film, and it's not even technically a war film, I don't find, but
No.
it kind of was obvious that really I need to have this, because one, it's directed by Howard Hawks. Two, it has Bacall and Bogart for the first time together on screen, which obviously their relationship blossomed during the filming of it. It's still a great film anyway. But what I'm basically going to argue is this is the foundation for going forward, which would be, what would be The Big Sleep, and then Dark Passage and Key Largo. And in so many ways, out of all 4 of them, Key Largo is my favorite. And
Yes.
I've kept it for the last, because I think it's just because it's got Edward G. Robinson in it. And this Big Sleep is in so many ways a classic noir, because of the foundations which it built with. Well, it had already built with Bogart anyway, and Bacall is just brilliant in it, and it's Chandler and everything like that. But it was To Have and Have Not, which was the one I was just constantly thinking, should I put this in? And in the end, I thought, no, it's going to look in this, because it's all 4. It's just look absolutely mad if I'm not going to include it.
No,
So,
I agree. I mean, you could have had, the confidential agent if you wanted to
yeah,
be, except nobody'd come. Although one of the interesting things about To Have and Have Not is what is the theme music by Franz Waxman, because he then
yeah,
uses it
yeah,
again on Confidential Agent and Dark Passage. It becomes this kind of Lauren Bacall theme tune, which is bizarre because it's this very
Yeah.
hard driving beat, but it was just this way of somehow connecting them in people's minds, which I find fascinating. Of course, if you want to see the noir version of To Have or Have Not, you have a fantastic movie, The Breaking Point, which Michael Curtiz made with John Garfield and Patricia Neal, and which is a sensational film that desperately needs to be seen more often. And even Don Siegel's The Gunrunners with Audie Murphy.
The Gunrunners, I keep on forgetting about The Gunrunners.
Yeah, well, Breaking Point is way better, but I mean, they're all adaptations of the Hemingway novel, which is really as we know, the story, which I hope is true, which is that Hawks and Hemingway were being all macho with each other, and Hawks bet that he could adapt even his worst book and make a decent movie out of it. So, and he said, well, that would be To Have and Have Not. And Hemingway said, all right, I'll give you the rights. Because, of course, it's sort of 3 novellas sort of glued together, and it's not a particularly good book. It doesn't read particularly as a novel. And one of the things about it is that the movie of To Have and Have Not tells you a lot about Hawks and Bacall and Bogart. And as you say, it's a great primer. So it's earned its place, but I understand your pain.
It's just the usual thing. It is like, is this, I mean, and that's why we kind of got on the festival. It's the Noir and Crime Film Festival, because at least if it isn't noir, at least it's a crime film. But even this isn't a crime film. So I've kind of shot myself in the foot already. But no, it was obvious that really, I really wanted to involve Bogart in some ways and Lauren Bacall, because it's our first one. Because if you think of noir, then it's Bogart at least, and this is how I've been able to get him in at least 4 of the films, because which is brilliant. It's him and Bacall really, and and Dark Passage. You hardly see Bogart for the first half, but
love that movie. And of course, most people, if if you ever decide to do funny films as part of your festival. Huge chunks of it, of course, got used in the Steve Martin classic Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. Huge parts of the plot are just nicked from Dark Passage. That was there's another Robert Taylor movie with Ava Gardner that they nicked. In a way, it was quite smart of them. They picked slightly less well-known noir films to use a lot of, so that you could bend it to your will for comedic purposes more easily, and you don't have as much baggage.
There is plans at some point to look at that Steve Martin and everything, but that's further down the line. But I'm not joking. There's so many additions I've still got left in my head, so it's all good really. But that's for another day at some point. The overall theme for this year is Dangerous Divas, so it kind of, like film noir itself, it seeps into that theme of Dangerous Divas, kind of goes into every element of, in some ways, in some of the other strands. So Bacall is obviously part of that Dangerous Divas thing, but then we've got the Mexican Noir films as well, and even the late neo noir night screens, because it's Body Heat and The Last Seduction. So, but we'll come to those in a minute. But no, the Dangerous Divas, that's the overall theme for this festival, because it kind of came out of, I'm involved with Cinema Rediscovered, which is the new restoration film festival, which we have in Bristol in July. And the initial idea was, because we were kind of offered in so many ways the new 4K restoration of Gilda, which we had the UK premiere thanks to Park Circus. We kind of thought, right, well, let's do a big Dangerous Divas thing. And as always with festivals, they change its shape constantly, and we just couldn't fit it in this strand anymore. So I kind of said to the guys, well, look, I've got a couple of thoughts about what, and we hadn't really said, I hadn't really talked to anyone about the Western idea yet. And I said, look, I'll leave it with me, because I want to push this a little bit further, because I think it's the right time to do it, because there's so many anniversaries, and this new 4K of Gilda, which is absolutely stunning. is just the perfect jumping board, really. So that's where it's come from. So the theme of Dangerous Divas was going to be something which seeps into almost every screen in which she's going to be there. So that's the key. So Dangerous Divas is the main strand, and then everything else is set around it.
You've got some brilliant choices. That, to me, actually, the one that was a particularly interesting surprise, because I would have perhaps expected Niagara for Marilyn Monroe, but instead we get Don't Bother to Knock, which is an underregarded film, and of course made by British director Roy Baker.
Yeah, so it was kind of on the cards for quite some time, and the reason why is Niagara. There's nothing wrong with Niagara. I think it's an absolutely gorgeous film.
Movie.
We've screened it once before already, and it's gorgeous. But I kind of just wanted it was a chance to screen something different, and I interviewed. This is going way back now, but I work for the BBC factual department, and I interviewed Roy Wall Baker. Probably about a year before he died, and we went to his flat in London and everything, and had a good chat and everything. I knew about the film, and I did ask him about it, and we had a good chat about Marilyn Monroe and how he felt working with her and everything like that, but also talking about the man himself, Richard Widmark. So it was like it kind of just stuck in my head, and I was like, no, I really want to screen this. And then speaking to Park Circus, they kind of said, well, actually it's a 4K, which we've got. So I was like, yeah, well, let's stick that in instead, because I needed a Marilyn Monroe film, and obviously, you know, the obvious one would be Niagara, but it was just like, we've screened it once before, and I want to bring something different, and it's a great film. Her performance in it is just mind-blowing. I think the fact that it's in many ways a breakout film. It's, you know, this is the film which she kind of establishes herself, and then from then on, you know, in so many ways, this is the first film where she gets star billing, I think, and it kind of just pushes itself out. And then I think Eddie Muller says for his intro for this film, I think he says something like, oh no, from 1952, this is the last year when no American knew who Marilyn Monroe was. Then after that, after 1953, everyone knew.
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire, and everything changes.
Yeah. And it was and it's Roy Ward Baker, and Roy was great to speak to, and I kind of just wanted to get this in very early, just because of
that. I mean, like I say, it was a very welcome surprise. It's great to have it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what for me is going to be a choice part of the festival, which is your international noir strand, which is 1950s Mexican noir. So you've got El Bruto, which is a Buñuel film that I have, in fact, never seen. So I'm really excited by that. And then you've got 3 films that star Ninón Sevilla. So so it's Aventurera, so the adventurous, Víctimas del Pecado, which is Victims of Sin, and Llévame en tus brazos, which is Take Me in Your Arms. Fascinating quartet. How did that come about? I'm really, really thrilled by it.
So I saw Victims of Sin in Bologna. Can't quite remember the year, but it might have been 2017 maybe, and it kind of stuck with me because it was just very alien. It just felt like I hadn't seen anything like this before from Latin America, where it's purely dark and just very entertaining and just mad, and so many elements of noir in there. Just the cinematography is just stunning. It kind of just stayed with me, and I kind of tried to track down the guys who had restored it for a couple of years. And then when the Film Noir UK idea came back, I was like, right, I need to find this again. And then I started hearing rumors that some of her other films had been restored, and I was like, right, okay, I need, and it took me about a year, and then I got hold of the people. It's that one particular person down in Mexico, and I got chatting to them. It was just like, yes, please, can we please put these on? And this was just before Criterion released Victims of Sin on Blu-ray over in the States.
Right.
Because initially I went to Criterion and I said, Giannis Films, who looks after their distribution. I said, well, who looks after these and who owns the UK distribution rights? And hilariously, he came back, the odd contact there, when we just look after the US rights, have no idea about the UK rights. So I was able to track down these guys in Mexico. They sent me some viewers for these particular ones. This is almost like a year ago now. And I was like, I definitely want to have these and definitely screen them. And they said, well, we don't have a UK distribution company. I said, well, okay. I thought about it, and I said, right. And I spoke to some of the other guys, and I said, do you want us to represent you? So we've gone into the distribution
My
business
goodness.
for the first time ever. So we own the distribution rights for the UK only, and we just kind of represent them. We look after their interests here. And it was just like, well, let's try this. So I offered it to the Cinema Rediscovered gang, and they said, yes, no, let's do this. So Victims of Sin got its UK release a couple of years ago for London Film Festival because it got picked up during then. But so I then decided, let me take these to Cinema Rediscovered and see what we can do with them. And they went down so well. And the idea was that I was going to take these to Noir Fest as well, because I really do want an international noir strand throughout the festival as well, because I just don't want it all being American and British and stuff. I really want to showcase other countries. We've done last year or the year before, we did a really good Argentinian noir season at Watershed over Christmas, and that was well attended as well. So it was just like, yeah, there's something definitely going on here. No one's really seen this stuff before, and it's only now really the likes of the Film Noir Foundation are making these new restorations for the Argentinian films, and these guys down in Mexico are doing it for the Mexican films. So that's how it works. I think going forward, we probably won't do it as a chunk thing. So we won't probably do it as, for instance, next year will be Argentinian noir. I don't think I'll take it down that route. I think I'll probably include, like, for instance, maybe something from Japan, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, but Japan, France. So you get an international flavor overall, not just one bulk thing. But I'm going to see how it goes, I think.
Yeah. Well, if you ever do Italian ones, give me a call.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's the Italian. I was kind of rewatching some Italian stuff recently. The 60s, 70s stuff, and I'd forgotten how good it is. And some of the music by, and most of the time it's Ennio Morricone anyway.
Sure.
Because he just constantly was churning these soundtracks out.
He really was.
So let's keep talking.
Oh, yeah. No, that'd be brilliant. What I was also going to say, I mean, that's very exciting. And obviously, you've also got the UK premiere of Studio Canal's new restoration of the sound version of Blackmail, yes? The Hitchcock 1929 film that also exists in the silent version. So you're showing both, and Neil Brand is going to be playing the music with Blackmail for the silent version. Fantastic.
I've known Neil literally since I started doing silent film studying, as it were, back in, like, going back to 2005, maybe even earlier, 2004. And it was, I'd always try and work with Neil. I worked on his BBC4 series as well, so I love him immensely.
Yeah.
There was a fantastic score he did, which was important only a couple of years ago, with a live orchestra with Ben Palmer conducting. And
I've heard it. Yeah, I think he did it at the Barbican, didn't he? I think I saw it there. Yeah,
I think that was just after Portnoni. But alas, I can't get a 70-piece orchestra into the Plaza in Western so Neil will be playing it on piano. But Neil's great, and I'm knowing Neil, he'll have something different in his head to approach the film with for us. So who knows? And yeah, the sound version was it was kind of come and get me type of thing from Studio Canal, because we've been working with them the last couple of months, actually, because we've got a couple of other silent Hitchcock films being screened throughout the Southwest, which kind of work in tail with this. So we're doing Manxman down in Polperro.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So that's happened, and then we're doing Champagne there and stuff. So, and The Ring. So it was kind of like, actually, let's do a heritage strand looking at early noir, and you look at elements of Blackmail, and it's just screaming noir. And also, Alfred Hitchcock went over to Ufa in the early 20s and studied under Murnau and Lang, and saw all this happening, and it affects the rest of noir as well, because Hitchcock goes on to do what he does, although whether or not there was actual official Alfred Hitchcock noir, I don't know. But
it's a vexed issue. I believe it or not, I'm going to be doing at least 2 podcasts just trying to thrash that one out, because people have endless debates about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have I have doubts about certain films, but there's other films which come into my mind which I think, yeah. But I think there's definitely something there with Blackmail, and obviously we're screening the silent version, which works with what Southwest Signs is all about in so many ways anyway. But no, the heritage strand is something which is going to continue as well, and we'll be looking at different elements from either pre-code Hollywood or silent film era again next year, if everything goes to plan.
finishing off as part of your neo-noir nights, you've got what to me is a terrific pair of films. So Body Heat is from 1981, which is probably the first noir I ever saw at the cinema. I probably saw it in 82, so I'd have been, let's say, 13. And it's got that fantastic John Barry score with a alto sax by Ronnie Lang. And it's actually one of the few genuine films noir up to that point that has a sax score. Because usually, although it's part of the cliche, it just isn't true. It's usually a clarinet up until that point. And then after that, it's nearly always a sort of sultry, sexy sax. And it's a terrific movie. But what I always find interesting about that is that it's a film that very much looks back to James M. Cain adaptations like Postman Always Rings Twice and, of course, Double Indemnity, which you're screening. So that's going to be great for audiences. And John Dahl's Last Seduction, which to me, I mean, I love that film. Linda Fiorentino, Bill Pullman, Peter Berg's really good in it, now better known as a director. But what's interesting to me is that while Body Heat is sort of looking back to the 40s, but doing things that could not have been done in terms of content, whereas I always feel like Last Seduction, deep down, it's only going back as far as Body Heat.
Yeah, totally. I think with Body Heat, the first ever time I ever knew about Body Heat was way back when I was probably a kid still, where I heard the music for it. And knowing it's John Barry, it's John Barry Bond, blah, 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 blah. And it was just like, okay, this sounds pretty good. And it took me a long time to get around to seeing Body Heat. I think I was in maybe the later part of university when I actually got around to seeing it. And I was devastated because it was just like, I should have seen this a lot earlier. And The Last Seduction I saw in college. I remember seeing that specifically in college. So it was always there. But once again, both these films work with that Dangerous Divas concept. They're even more dangerous, I think, in these two films than in most of the other films which we screen. There's human desire in so many ways. Gloria Graham's dangerous in that. And as is, with Big Heat, Gloria Graham in The Big Heat is totally different to the Gloria Graham, the femme fatale, which we see in Human Desire. And yet she's still very dangerous in The Big Heat, and I'm not going to say why. But it's the same with Body Heat and Last Seduction. They're classic femme fatales, which take it to the next level. And also, the fact that I really wanted to get a film in with Ted Danson in.
Dancing, Ted Danson.
Yeah,
yes.
No, I know. I was like, I remember seeing it for the first time. I went, oh my God, Ted Danson's in this. And I saw his name in the credits, and it just blanked me. I just didn't realise. And then I saw it, and I went, that's Ted Danson. What's he doing this? And Last Seduction's been in my mind for quite some time because of Red Rock West had been a film I've been chasing for ages, which I was hoping we were going to screen last year, and it just never happened due to a number of issues, really. So I'm glad I got The Last Seduction in because it works perfectly with this. At some point, I'm hoping something will happen with John Dahl with us, with
brilliant.
In particular some sort of thinking, but not quite yet. But I think further down the line, we'll try and do something.
I mean, he's a busy guy, of course, working in television.
Yeah.
But,
the one thing I would say about Film Noir Fest overall is because of the way it's spread out in the schedule and everything, you're not going to be able to see everything. And that's the entire point. What I would say is go and see the stuff which you've never seen before if you can, because it's more than likely, like the Mexican films, in so many ways, we're probably not going to screen them for quite some time again. Other films like, Out of the Past or Double Indemnity or even, Scarlet Street, it's more than likely they will return at some point nearer in the future because they're the classics. So, and we've got this space to do this because we've got two cinemas to play around with. And it's the same with Last Seduction, Body Heat. I don't know when I'm going to be doing these again because where do they fall underneath this Dangerous Divas thing, really, if we're not going to do it again? So
absolutely. And you're quite right. And I mean, Linda Fiorentino, that there's a particularly, I think, who is probably the most dangerous since Jane Greer and Out of the Past, probably.
Yeah.
The most truly bent, and she's just fantastic. It's just
she's brilliant, and the fact that basically the other two characters, the male two characters, are just idiots.
I know, they're such suckers.
They're total idiot. It's just like how idiotic can you guys be? And then you just think, well, no, actually, I can see where you're coming from. But at the same time, she just owns them. It's such a good film.
In a way, that's what I meant. Again, not to get into spoilers at all, but one of the interesting things about, although we're talking about obviously not particularly recent films, but with something like Body Heat, one of the things that's interesting to me is that the finale of that film gives you a brand new, exciting twist just in the last minute, which is great, which I think most viewers wouldn't automatically have seen coming. And so that gives you an extra narrative thrill. But it's linked with a sense of melancholy. There's a little bit of waste. There's a kind of, even if you get everything you want and that still isn't enough, or if actually you realize belatedly that you've done what you've done, but there are elements of it that you now regret. What's interesting about films like Last Seduction, and increasingly, I suspect, neo-noir type films as they go forward, is they're so much harder than that. I mean, Body Heat, by comparison, seems like quite a soft movie. Whereas Last Seduction and those so many that have followed, even something like, say, Basic Instinct, they're much tougher on the characters. There's no sense of regret. There's no sense of loss along the way. Usually these are just incredibly driven, truly hard-boiled characters, whether they're hommes or femme fatales, and they just keep going. And you either stop or they get away with it at the end, or the wrong person gets in the slammer or what have you. And that's kind of it. And I find that fascinating. I thought that was a very well-judged pairing, so I'm looking forward. I'll only be able to see one of them, unfortunately, because then I'll be on the train back to London for the other one. But but I'm really looking forward to it. James, it sounds fantastic. I'm really looking forward to going. I will be there with bells on for Friday, Saturday and Sunday. It's a thrilling lineup, and I'm so glad to hear that you've got number 2 and number 3 already in the planning stages. That sounds fantastic.
It's in the head. Whether or not Merlin let me back, I don't know, but the venue itself lets me back, I don't know, but it's in the head, and let's see what happens. The other thing is about South by Silence and Film Noir UK is that it's all about the passion. Silent film, of all of the silent film screens we've ever probably done, have never made money for us. We have to pay the pianist or the musicians. We have to pay the license for the film, because everyone seems to think silent films are out of copyright, which nearly all of them aren't. We have to pay the restoration fees, and then we have a really good relationship with venues in Bristol and outside of Bristol, which we do a special deal with them as well when it comes to the box office. We've never made any money on silent film events, mainly because they're so expensive to run, but it's not that. We just love it because we just have a passion for it. And it's the same with Film Noir UK. So all the events which we ever put on, whether it's a silent film event or Film Noir UK, which actually has started bringing in a little bit of money for us. All that money which we make, if anything, goes back straight into the events pot for next time. So we've never taken a kick out of all of it, because we just do it as the love of film in so many ways. There may be the odd expense for a research book or a Blu-ray or something, but that's it. Nearly everything else goes straight back into next year. So any money which we make for Film Noir Fest 2024 will be going straight back into Film Noir Fest 2025, hopefully. So do come and grab yourself a pass, or tickets are on sale now separately for each screening. I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys over the weekend, because it's the thing, it's not just about the films, it's meeting people and chatting, and it's all very much part of a crime family, as it were.
That's
so
great.
That's what I'm hoping, is that to make it very much a family gathering of every year.
So see you on the first day of November, James.
Yes, thank you.
Take care. You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners, and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix, and it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.